On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, which teams are going for it in the Western Conference in 2024-2025, and which teams are hoping to do that?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in the rearview mirror, the sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we tear up the Western Conference with the Contenders, the maybes, and the Pretenders. And let me tell you, there are going to be some surprises here today. My name is Seth Toupal, sporting a wonderful tan, or an attempt at one, at least, joined by JD Young of Locked On Sharks. JD, 4th of July is in the rearview mirror somehow. And so we're going to take a look now that the free agency dust has kind of settled. The trades have, the trade winds have kind of gone quiet. We're going to have teams just kind of hunkering down here until midway through August. And so this is a perfect opportunity to just take a little assessment as to where we're at in the Western Conference. And so we're going to look at the teams that are legitimately going for it this year, the teams that are on the bubble, and the teams that are just being marked present for the particular class. They're just there. They're not really in it for serious
things.
Yeah, they're just, we're just happy they're here, and we're happy they're having fun.
Yeah, that's all that matters.
So let's start with the Contenders, because it feels like there are a handful of clearly defined teams that are like legitimately in the mix, legitimately going to be at the top of the standings. Now, there'll be one or two that'll probably not live up to expectations, but we're just calling it as we see it here at this point in the offseason. So just take me through the names that you had on the Contenders list, and then we'll talk about it. I'll kind of give my spin, and we'll talk about why we think those teams deserve to be in that spot.
All right. In no particular order, the Dallas Stars, Colorado Avalanche, Nashville Predators, Vancouver Canucks, and Edmonton Oilers. These are the teams who I think are all legitimate contenders for the Western Conference belt going into this season. And they all do have questions. None of these teams that you look at, and you're like, this is the team to beat, right? And they'll be, that's the great thing about the season, is they'll, kind of solve some of these questions. But those are the teams as of right now that I feel like I could picture them playing for the, as we talked beginning of July, I could picture one of these teams playing for the Stanley Cup and representing the Western Conference come June next year, which feels like a million years from now. And I'm sure one, if not all of these teams will disappoint in some sort of way. But yeah, those are the teams I kind of came up with going down the list right now.
It's a great list, because the Dallas Stars, like, their window is open. Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, all that talent around them. They have uncoupled themselves from Ryan Suter, replaced him with Matt Dumba, which is just hilarious irony, by the way.
Yes.
So
Joe Pavelski, RIP.
But best of luck. Best of luck in your future endeavors, broadcast career, coaching, whatever he decides to do. He's going to be great at it.
Yes.
Even if he decides, I'm done with the limelight, I kind of want to just enjoy. Like, he's gonna crush at that too. Like,
yes,
it's an enviable spot. But so much talent, so much scoring. Jake Ottinger, just continuing to develop and grow as a young goalie in the league. They've got a lot of the things that you need. They've got great top-end defensemen. They've got scoring up and down the lineup, definitely on the list. Colorado Avalanche also because you got Nathan McKinnon.
If you have Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar, those guys will drag you through a lot of wins. Even if it's them two, those guys will just drag you to wins. Yes,
That's pretty much all you need for a successful season there. Goaltending, that continues to be kind of an interesting spot. But the thing about Colorado is having those top end players, they're always going to be in contention.
Yes.
So they're legitimately going for it. The team that did the most, made the biggest swings, the Nashville Predators, definitely got to be on this list too. Barry Trotz just throwing money around like he's at the Vegas casinos and is just...
He was.
Not,
I saw him.
throwing stacks of $100 bills,
yes,
slot machines to try to get them to do their thing. So Nashville, by the sheer amount of moves that they've made, the high-profile players, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea, like that's a good one of those guys would be a good offseason for a team.
Let all three.
all three at once. They've got UC Saros, they've got Roman Josi. They got a lot to like in Nashville, so they definitely have to be on the list as well. It's interesting because you look at Vancouver, what they were able to accomplish. We're always going to kind of wonder what could have been.
Yeah,
the just injuries that you can't afford to have happen at the end of the season. Thatcher Demko, Casey DeSmith as well. We're going to kind of wonder what could have been for that Vancouver team, but they still have a great core. They've got Rick Tocchet as head coach. I don't think I don't think Vancouver's going to miss too much of a beat.
No, and getting Jake DeBrusk, I think it's a really nice signing as well, where he doesn't have to be the guy, right? You have Elias Pettersson, you have a lot of these other guys. I think he's going to fit in really well there. You're probably going to be looking at like 30 goals and 60 points out of him total, as he's kind of
easy
upper end secondary scoring. Yeah. So,
and then Edmonton, and same story as Colorado. They've got McDavid and Draisaitl, and until that combo goes the way of the Beatles, they're going to be in it every year. Now, we've seen it play out time and time again. This was the closest they got, and they came up one potential game-tying goal short to send it to OT in Game 7 and potentially win that series. But they're going to be right back in the mix too. So I think definitively, without a doubt, we can say that those teams for sure are in. And it's not to say that the others aren't, but they're just
where they stack right now.
There are some questions with these other teams that will kind of make it so it'll be up to them as to if they can go from bubble to legitimate contender. And so we're going to shift into those bubble teams. Who's on the bubble? Whose bubble is popping? What are the other teams that are not? So we got the bubble teams, and then we have the absolute like bottom of the barrel. So we are going to the middle of the barrel right now with the bubble teams. That's on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You know me. Love sports. Absolutely love sports. I love them so much. I want them to be in session all year long. All four of the big ones and the other supporting sports as well. But football, basketball, baseball, NHL, just play them 12 months a year, 24/7, 365. Because we get to this point in the season, once the playoffs are over for the NHL and the NBA, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sportsing the way that we want them to. But FanDuel is here to the rescue. They can help you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. What's up? What's happening? Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Once today's episode is done, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can just hang out and head into the first of its kind 24/7 streaming channel. Locked On Sports Today brings you all of the biggest news and all of your favorite sports personalities without what, JD?
The yelling.
The
yelling, Seth.
Yeah, we've got none of the yelling, all of the sports topics and the takes that you'll love. So make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. Again, first of its kind, 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the Amazon Fire TV channels app. We got you covered every single day of the week, especially in the off season. That's when things get cranked up to 11. Is you've got some of these other shows that take the summer off. They take the off season off. We're here for you every single day. And we're moving from bona fide contenders to the bubble. So just give me your list of bubble teams, JD, and then we'll discuss as to why these teams aren't contenders, but could still potentially make the postseason.
All right. So in no particular order, the Winnipeg Jets, the Vegas Golden Knights, the LA Kings, and the Utah Hockey Club are in my bubble. And I'm probably projecting a little bit with Utah as the you need to do something now team, because it feels like they're very much the you need to do something now team. But with the other teams, LA, Vegas, and in Winnipeg, all these teams feel like they've taken a step back from last year, right? You've seen these teams kind of lose a lot of talent. Winnipeg, there's some questions about if Nikolai Ehlers is going to get traded. We've seen, I think Vegas has been kind of hemorrhaging talent as well without restocking it. And then the Kings are very much in this Minnesota Wild-esque, let's get to the first round and then lose the first round every year. And I think
had to bring that up, didn't you?
Like you said, we call them like we see them. And it kind of feels like the Kings are in that cycle of, are they going to take a step back here? Or are they going to maybe try to push forward, but they're kind of running out of chips to play? So yeah, they're very much in that kind of thing. But with Utah, right, they've been aggressive this offseason. They have a really talented young core that they've been drafting well and developing well. They've added some big pieces, as we talked about last week, with they basically rebuilt the entire blue line in a day. And it feels like they're ready to kind of make a run. And they were really good the first half of the season last year before things fell apart. I think with new ownership, a new blue line, I think this team can compete for a playoff spot. Maybe they don't make the playoffs, but at least give those new fans and any transplant Arizona Coyote fans something to root for a franchise that has been slogged in misery the last couple seasons.
Yeah, it's been a fortnight plus since the Utah/Arizona team has been in the postseason picture. So it'd be nice if it would happen this time. My list, pretty similar, because Winnipeg is definitely there. Winnipeg had one of maybe the quietest off seasons of any team in
not named the Ducks.
Yeah, not named the Anaheim Ducks, who did nothing, which we'll talk about. So Winnipeg definitely feels worthy of that spot. Los Angeles Kings always feel like just this kind of perennial. We've got a ton of really good pieces, but it's the same thing every season. And now you're going to go from Cam Talbot, Phoenix Copley, and David Riddick to Darcy Kemper as your goalie situation. I know there's a lot of time for things to change between now and the start of the season, but as I see it right now, that's that's not winning you a postseason series. That's gonna maybe be enough with that offense to get you to the postseason, but good luck beyond that. Vegas, same story. It feels like the cap unflexibility is kind of starting to catch up to them, and all the picks and prospects that have been traded away from that system. It feels like they're kind of trading away like every goalie except Aiden Hill. If he can get through the full season, you're probably fine. But if not,
he hasn't been able to.
Yeah. So that definitely feels right for them. The only change I would make, I'm going to swap out Utah and I'm going to put Seattle in. I am buying what Dan Bilesma is selling. I know he's only been on the job for a couple of
20
weeks.
minutes.
Yeah, after Coachella Valley lost in the Calder Cup final for the second straight season. Then it was the Dan Bilesma era in Seattle, but I don't know. I feel like Seattle kind of takes a step forward under new direction. And so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to put them in the pretenders list, but beyond that, as we'll talk about, obviously there are a ton of teams left, but there are a ton of teams that they got some work to do.
Who's the team out of your bubble team? Could you see maybe by like Christmas time or maybe by the new year where we're talking about as, oh, wow, what happened here? This team fell apart. Which is that team for you that we could be talking about as a potential lottery type of team, you think?
I don't know if they'll be a lottery team, but it feels like the Los Angeles Kings for me, because it feels like they are operating on very, very like eggshells. Like it feels like they're getting to the point where it's like, if this doesn't pop quickly,
Rob Blake
is going to be the first to go, and they're going to really assess kind of where they're at. So it's definitely the Kings for me, because Vegas, they'll be in the mix. They might not be able to get it done, or they'll just make a massive trade at the trade deadline again.
Yeah, that's with Vegas, right? As we were talking about, like, oh, I don't see this thing. And then, 6 months from now, we're like, oh, wow, I can't believe they pulled off this maneuver, even though they have no picks or any, it does. I mean, they traded away their first round pick last year, the 2023 pick. They traded away David Edstrom. They made a pick this year. They don't have their pick next year because that's going to San Jose. They don't have the pick 2026 because that's going to Calgary. Like at some point, and their prospect pool is one of the worst in the NHL. Like at some point, you just run out of stuff to trade. So I mean, while we do talk about like, yes, they're always going to be for every superstar available. Like other teams are just gonna be like, I just have more stuff to trade than you at some point here. But they are pretty ruthless, and they'll trade anybody and everyone. And who knows what the magic that they can kind of conjure up here. But for personal sake, they're the team I think that we could be talking about, like, because I mean, if Eichel gets hurt and Mark Stone, who can't stay healthy at all, you lose those two guys. And like you said, if Aiden Hill kind of can't stay healthy, like you're looking at a team that doesn't have a lot of talent behind its superstars. So that could be the team that we're looking at by Christmas is going, what's going on here, guys?
Yeah, that's where things get a little on the dicey side. So I can't wait. I can't wait to try to explain to my own fan base why why the team that why the team that I cover, why the team that you cover are in the same category, because it feels like there's a little bit of a divide between the two, but it also feels like there's a little bit of a divide between where the Minnesota Wild are at and where the teams that we just discussed are at. And so we'll talk about the teams that are burst bubbles, the pretenders for this upcoming season. We'll do that to wrap up today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. One final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. And once again, we are your team every day. I'll repeat that. every day, even in the off season, even when other shows pack their bags and go to, we'll see you next season. Locked On is here for you, bringing you the news, bringing you through the off season. We're your top option for sports throughout all seasons. So we appreciate everybody's support and want to see that continue here through these next couple of months into the 2024-2025 season. All right, JD, let's talk about the Pretenders, which, if you've been paying attention, includes the following teams: St. Louis, Minnesota, Utah for me, Chicago, Calgary, Anaheim, San Jose. And for you, it is St. Louis, Minnesota, Chicago, Calgary, Seattle, Anaheim, San Jose.
Yes.
What do those teams have in common? Well, most of them.
They stink. No, I mean, a good chunk of these teams are rebuild teams, right? And it's easy to kind of like Calgary, which has finally accepted, okay, we need to tear things down, right? This is a rebuilding team now. Anaheim, which has been rebuilding for a while. San Jose, which has been rebuilding. Chicago has been rebuilding. Like, those are all kind of, I think even if you divide, like, that's one section. And then you have the kind of like basement stairs team. Like, they live on the stairs, are kind of peeking in to make sure if there's any room to kind of come upstairs. Would be like the Blues, the Wild, the Kraken. Like, you could talk me into a world where those teams make the playoffs, if things go right. But I still think those teams are lacking a direction. Or I'm confused by the direction of those. And I guess let's start with your team, which feels like the team of, again, like, what is this team doing right now with the Minnesota Wild, where they have superstar like Kaprizov, but they also have $15 million tied up in dead money, and they're kind of hamstrung by not being able to pick high picks because they're too good to be bad, but they're too bad to be good. They're a creamy middle team. So what are the Wild just stuck like that for now?
Yes. And it's come down to this. Like, obviously, the funny part about this is there is so much talent, like, in the prospect pool. Perennially a top 10 team in prospects that just it's just crazy that that the Wild have so many players that are so talented. It just doesn't feel like there's any room for them on the roster right now. And could some of this be by design? Perhaps, but you also have a lot of players that are locked into long-term deals with trade protection, that it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we're going to trade you to somebody else. Like, you have to get approval from particular players, or you have to go the buyout road. You have to go, all these other options that are just frankly unnecessary. So it's what we knew going in, it was going to be one more season of this, and then stuff was going to open up. But now the problem is that you kind of saw the money start to appear, and so you started to spend a little bit of it.
So you pay down the credit card a little bit. You're just like, okay, let's ring it up again. Yeah.
The Minnesota Wild, their season is contingent on basically the entire team staying fully healthy. A handful of players regaining form that may not have been attainable in the first place, and being able to beat teams above you in the division consistently, which is something that's just never. The Wild were 0-10 against teams above them in the Central, which was Dallas, Winnipeg, Colorado, Nashville. They were 0-10 against those teams last year. So it feels like it's put together on a premise that just really does not have a great chance of hitting. But then they're in the same categories like the St. Louis Blues, who have basically said, yeah, we're taking a step back.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at. That's rant over, but every show I do turns into a rant.
They're directionless. That's the problem. That's the worst place to be in sports, is being directionless. And they're just kind of waiting for something to happen right now, which is it's the worst thing in sports right now. The Blues, right? And you touched on it, and they're kind of, I think they're trying to kind of navigate this retool on the fly, right? Of getting younger and getting some younger players in here and trying to kind of rebuild around some of their guys that they drafted. But I don't know. Maybe it's just the Blues, and they're always just kind of the Blues to me. They feel like a team that, again, it's you're too good to be bad, and you're too bad to be good. And like picking 10th in the draft every year, like 10 through 15 in the draft every year, is just not like a great spot to be in, because you're missing out on the top tier talent. Yes, there's good players there and stuff, but you're missing out on the top tier talent by not being in one of the top 5 picks in this 2025 draft. Is supposed to be pretty sick, as early indications from very smart people have told me. But like, you're kind of stuck, and it's like you're eventually going to get passed by teams like Chicago, who have been picking high, or Utah, who've been picking high, and they've now added some good pieces here. And like, even in your own division, like, you're going to get passed by these teams because they have a direction. And Chicago tanked. They tore things down quickly. They've been doing a good job of gathering pieces, and they're probably going to be bad again this year. But you're going to have Bedard. They've added some nice pieces around Bedard in year 2. I like Kevin Kurchinski. I don't like, maybe he spends a year playing in the AHL. I think he's a little bit out of his depth last year, but I still like Kurchinski as a player. And they're just going to continue to add another top 5 piece in this year's draft. They added a second overall pick in this year's draft, and they going to be bad this year, but you can see where they're going. They added Tyler Bertuzzi. Yeah, it's frustrating to be one of those teams.
It's frustrating to be one of the teams that is just hoping that a lot of variable things happen, and seeing a team on that plane like Chicago, like Utah, like the San Jose Sharks, like seeing them kind of add as they build. I can't imagine what that's like. I wish I could.
It's great. Not watching your team lose like a bajillion games in a season and having to talk about it every night. That stinks. But like, this is, as Bill Parcells once said, this is why you lift all those weights. This is why you lose all those games, to get yourself. And now the Sharks have Celebrity and Will Smith, who are going to be 18 and 19 respectively, going into the NHL next year, and they're going to lose a lot of games next year. But you can see the future for San Jose, and that this is a team in a couple years where you're going to be like, oh yeah, Celebrini and Smith are really good, and you've added a lot of quality pieces around them, and they built this right. But yeah, again, they're gonna stink. What team out of this group, this basement group, I know we had a little bit different here, but which team could you talk yourself into maybe making a surprise run of being like a fun, frisky, like, okay, maybe they don't make the playoffs, right? But maybe they're one of those teams that we're talking about, like, wow, I did not see this coming.
Of these, I feel like, why do I want to say Chicago? Like, I know it's insanely early for them to start making a run, but I can't oversell enough, or I can't emphatically say enough. Like, that team is going to be a pain to play against on a nightly basis. And I feel like at some point it's just going to frustrate the opponents to the point where they're like, well, this is miserable. Like, I don't like any part of this. And I feel like, especially in the Central Division with the young talent that they have, I feel like they could take advantage of a bunch of teams kind of headed this way and catch them on the elevator as they make the way up. So I'm going to say Chicago of this mix. I'm going to say they are the ones in my mind that could potentially make a leap this year.
Yeah, Bedard just like puts out 100 points, and Tyler Bertuzzi is good, and maybe Kurchinski, they can kind of solve their defense, and like, you could see it. You could wait and see it, and again, maybe not make the playoffs, but make things interesting and at least kind of play meaningful games, at the trade deadline. I could see that for them. I could also see them, kind of the same type of season as before. So I like that one with Chicago. I'm going to pick Anaheim because I know they've had like the quietest of quiet off seasons, but like, you don't just keep picking top 5 picks for 1,000 years and before you actually do something. And you look at like what they've done, especially down the middle, right? Leo Carlson, who I know dealt with some injuries last year, but that's a top 2 pick. You have Mason McTavish, who's also a top 3 pick. You're getting Cutter Gauthier, he's going to be making his, kind of full season in the NHL. And I know they have some questions with Trevor Zegras and what's up with that. They have a bunch of young, exciting defensemen, and whatever you do with John Gibson, who knows? But this team they've been waiting to do something at some point. And I could totally, they played well for the first chunk of the season last year before things fell apart. I could see them being that team of okay, we're done with the rebuild stuff. Let's start to build. Let's start to kind of see what this core can take us, because it's been 20 years, it feels like.
New little tweak to the uniforms, maybe gives them enough momentum to fly
the all
into
orange
battle. I love it. I love it so much. It's so clean. I want one. I'm gonna have to probably get a Zegras, which, knowing my luck, he'll get traded the moment I buy it.
Yep.
But at one of these years, it's going to happen for Anaheim. One of these years, it's just going to have to. They can't perpetually be in this cycle forever. Yeah. Then again, the Minnesota Wild have
the Buffalo Sabres would like a word too. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, before I go into a deep spiral, I think that's a good spot to leave it here for this week.
I'll send you some celebrity highlights. It'll be great.
Thank you for that. When we for next week, we are going to be taking a look at the winners and the losers of free agency in the Western Conference. We already talked about one of them quite a bit, but we'll talk about a few others. Maybe the best fit for a player in the Western Conference, things along those lines. So make sure to tune in to next week's edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Make sure to hit the like button before you head out if you are watching on YouTube. Otherwise, make sure to leave us a kind review on your favorite audio platforms as well. Wherever you tune in, whether it's in the car, on your phone, on your laptop, we appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be part of our show, and appreciate having you along. We'll have more for you throughout the rest of the week here on Locked On NHL. Once again, we are your team every day.